Hey guys, it's Pokémon SAR TCG here, back with a brand new video. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about whether you should be buying Scarlet and Violet SAR cards. I'm talking specifically about SAR Pokemon cards. So we'll just be going into a little guide of what these cards are, how rare they are in terms of the probability or the categorization of this rarity. We're going to be talking about how rare SARs are on the market in general, and also how they're currently priced. Finally, we'll just be talking about how I think they'll do in the future, and end with whether I think you should buy them. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing to probably talk about is what are SAR cards? And we can't do that without discussing what SAR stands for. SAR stands for Special Art Rare. Special Art in Japanese is the Japanese terminology for calling alt arts. So it's basically a formal term for alt art cards. Now the first introduction to SARs that we saw was actually in V-Star Universe, so it was at the end of the Sword and Shield era. And the interesting thing that this type of rarity introduced is that it introduced for the first time SAR cards for supporter trainer cards as well. Now I know everyone's going to want me to focus on the female trainer cards, so I will be calling them waifus, but just as a disclaimer, I do not consider these underage girls to be wives, okay? So SAR cards are special art rares, alt art cards introduced in V-Star Universe, but as I'll be showing you a few of what I've got, they were really sort of given the forefront or the limelight in Scarlet and Violet. And what these cards did was basically replace the HR rarity. So before I go further into this video, I should probably talk about the different types of rarities. So HR rarity, as you can see in this corner, is hyper rare rarity. Hyper rare rarity. And this was sort of the type of chase cards for Sword and Shield, whether it was rainbows, which were not so much chase cards, but the alt arts, the VMAX ones, were HRs. So very, very desirable and hard to pull. Now, in the Scarlet and Violet era, we no longer have HR rarity cards. We have SR cards. So that is our standard super rare cards. These are going to be your most common sort of type of hit to pull, aside from the AR art rares. I'm not going to be considering those. So we have the SR full art cards still, and then we have the SAR cards. We have the beautiful Venusaur there, and then we have the gold UR or ultra rare cards, which have basically been carried over for a few generations. Moving on to the second question, how rare are SARs in terms of the rarity category? As I said before, SAR cards have replaced HR cards, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are as rare as HR cards. Now, there isn't a wealth of data available on YouTube. I did see someone opening a case of Triplet Beat, in which they only pulled one SAR, but in reality, it's easier to pull than 1 in 12. What I would say is SARs are probably, and this is probably the fairest way to categorize them, SARs are more common than HR cards. So these new SAR chase cards are more common than this rarity, but they are still rarer than the SR rarity. So that's the first bit of discussion of how rare they are in theory in terms of the category. Next, we need to consider how rare actually are they on the market, and that's just based on pure numbers. How difficult is it to find them? And the answer to that is very simple. They're not difficult at all. Now, this is especially the case for Pokemon SARs. This generation really started formalizing, like making waifu cards into the chase cards of the sets. And what I mean by that is that in the Sun and Moon era, you did have those waifu cards, but at the time, they were never the chase cards. They were like cool cards to pull, but not the chase cards. And I'm just going to start showing different SARs as I talk through this. But yeah, they were not the chase cards. It's only in this generation, really, and V-Star Universe that they've actually been given special treatment that usually only Pokemon got before. So they are very easy to find, even the waifu ones, but the waifu ones take the cake in terms of price. There is only one exception to this, which is the recently released Charizard SAR from Ruler of the Black Flame. That one can kind of compete with these waifus, but otherwise. So I'm just going to read out some of these prices. We have the Miriam SAR from Violet base set, which in a PSA 10 is still between £800 to £1,000 or $1,000 to $1,200 US. Then in Triplet Beat, we had the Dendra SAR, which is around £400 in a PSA 10, and that's probably my favorite one. And then we have the most expensive, I would say, SAR or card of the whole Scarlet and Violet generation so far, which is the Iono SAR from Clayburst. And that one is probably also around £1,000. And finally, in the more recently released Pokemon 151, we've got the Erica SAR, which is probably around £600 in a PSA 10. Now, as I said, the main focus of this video is whether you should be buying these Pokemon SARs, of which you can see I have a lot of which I've pulled, a lot of which I've bought. Here we have some examples of trainer SARs that I've pulled myself. So now let's talk a little bit about the prices of these Pokemon SAR cards that I have in front of you. I picked up all of these almost for super cheap. First we have the Great Tusk SAR in a PSA 10, which I didn't even pull myself. Comes from the Scarlet base set, and the texture is just amazing. And something that they've added to SARs in Scarlet and Violet is this signature glitter as well. This card I picked up for £40, which by today's standards is actually a bit too expensive even. Now that's a little bit crazy when I think about that. So £40 is around $55 US, and now, I mean, I've seen auctions of this card ending for £28. When you factor in the grading cost of £14 plus the postage that you have to pay to and from the middleman, that makes this card is pretty much worth what it is raw, if not cheaper raw. We've got the Koraidon SAR, again beautiful texture, drawn by the same artist who drew the Charizard alt art from Brilliant Stars or Starbirth. Picked up for £100 in a PSA 10. I thought I was getting a good deal, but you could probably get this for £80, £70 now in a PSA 10. Next we have the Gardevoir, which is probably one of the higher end Pokemon SAR cards that can compete with some of those in 151. This one I picked up for £300, probably like $350 US, just out of FOMO. When I saw it at a card show, I just really wanted it. Still iconic and beautiful, but in a PSA 10, I would say it's probably around £200 now, $250 US, if not a little bit lower. So far, all that's to say, I've just shown you all the Pokemon SARs from Scarlet base set. They are pretty cheap in my opinion. And now we're gonna get on to what I think is the really cheap stuff, or at least some examples of them. We've got the Venusaur SAR from Pokemon 151. This is honestly one of the most beautiful modern cards I've seen, especially when you add it together with the Bulbasaur and Ivysaur. This on Mercari, which you can pick up, cost me like £25 or $30 US. Now it does have its condition issues, but that is crazy cheap to me. Again, Blastoise SAR drawn by Mitsuhiro Arita, and you see the sort of circular texture going around. Cost me £30, 5,000, 6,000 yen. Now this one was a little bit expensive, but it's to be expected. It's the Charizard, so £100, I think that's fair enough. This one I pulled myself, so not really a price to discuss, but it's probably £100, $120 US wrong. These cards again, I did pull myself, but on Mercari you can find them for £55 or 65 to 70 US dollars. That's the Zapdos SAR, which has the 3 birds on it. Again, very beautiful. Next we've got the Alakazam. You guys won't believe what I got this for. This was £20 or like 23 US dollars. For an Alt Art Alakazam, which is glittery and awesome. This one is a little bit expensive. It's the iconic Mew, where you can sort of see the sunrise, but again, one that I pulled myself. And again, these ones from, all of these, you know, these ones you can probably get for like, again, 20 pounds, 20 to 25 US dollars. These ones for even less. So that's a little taste of what these SAR cards are costing raw. And just bear in mind that they are meant to be sort of the chase cards from Scarlet and Violet, at least in my opinion. Together with the waifu cards, they are alt art cards where, you know, there's been genuine care put into the illustration. So hopefully you guys enjoy these cards as much as I do. I mean, they still have this sort of signature Japanese texturing, detail and quality, which you cannot find on English cards. Plus, they are cheap now, which is wonderful if you're just trying to collect them. But how do I think they're going to be doing in the future? Now, the performance of anything, any investment or asset in the future is dependent on your initial cost for it, right? So without advocating too much, these cards being 25 pounds, 30 pounds doesn't make sense to me. Just think about it. A booster box of Pokemon 151 costs 140 pounds. In Japan, it's 97 pounds. So, you know, you're paying between 150 US dollars to 160 US dollars on eBay in the US, right? So how is it possible that two of the top, 5, 6, 7 chase cards can only cost 1/5 or like a quarter of a box price? That disparity between the box price and the SARs doesn't make sense to me. Now, that's not to say that the SARs are undervalued. It could very well be that the boxes are overvalued. And to an extent, it is true that the prices will have to converge both ways, right? So the box price is going to come down slowly because I think there's going to be another reprint, or I've heard that there's going to be a big reprint in September. And these cards might go up slowly over time, remains to be seen, because there's one other factor that I wanted to discuss about the investability of these cards. There's been a game changer in the sort of Pokemon card collecting sphere recently, which perhaps not many people are thinking about, but which I noticed myself. When you go browsing for cards on Mercari in Japan, you'll notice that instead of them all being raw, you can actually find quite a bit of graded cards now. PSA graded ones as well for PSA collectors. And there's one very obvious reason for that, which is that PSA recently opened an official branch in Japan, probably a year and a half ago now. But Scarlet and Violet is the first generation where Japanese people, from the very start of a generation, have direct access to a grader. And what that means is that all of the supply in Japan can be graded directly there at a low cost. Think about all the barriers that stop us from grading. It's about, you know, the safety of sending items over across the Atlantic to the US, you know, what happens with the insurance? If the parcel gets lost, can you trust your middleman? When you've got a sort of PSA home base in your own country, and you are the same country that produces these cards, that leads to an instant conveyor belt process, right? Where these cards can be instantly graded the fastest directly from Japan and sold pretty quickly. So I'm just going to put a few screenshots of what I've been seeing on Mercari recently. You can see these prices of SAR PSA 10 cards, and in fact, I'm just going to take a look on my laptop right now so that I can discuss it at the same time. Okay, so I've just pulled up a screen and already I can see a Meowscarada PSA 10 for 98 pounds, 110 US dollars. You would have had to pay more than that to get the card raw before, but it's already graded in Japan. You know, you can probably see the Chen Pao. So This is really a game changer for the prices of Japanese cards, I think, because as they come out of the gate, if you start counting sort of late Sword and Shield and start of Scarlet and Violet, you will be able to find a lot of these cards in PSA 10s already on these websites. Now, the higher the graded stock is from the very start, and in PSA 10, the more common the card remains for a long period of time, especially encapsulated in good condition, and the more that detracts from, I would say, the long-term potential of the cards. So at the end of the day, if you want to invest in SARs, I think you should keep that in mind, that with PSA being opened in Japan, with grading in general being way more accessible to people, including you and me, as you've seen, I've been, getting returns in every week. I think that is going to have an impact on the investability of these modern cards, especially Scarlet and Violet, because this is ultra modern going into the future. However, what I still don't understand is, given the popularity of these Pokemon, and the popularity of the Pokemon is a big factor in its value, I don't understand why this Blastoise card is £30 and the Rayquaza V from Blue Sky Stream, which is technically, on a probability scale, it's more common than SARs. That Rayquaza is like £315. So it's that disparity that doesn't make sense to me right now. And for £315 or $350 US, I could pick up 10 of these. Obviously right now, the PSA 10 graded prices for these cards are quite high, but they will come down over time. So the question is, what's going to happen to these cards in the long run? No one has the answer. I'm not telling you, you definitely need to invest in these. I'm just telling you, despite the fact that you can pull these in, God packs, some of these are just too cheap for me to not pick up. Even if purely from an aesthetic point of view, the fact that they have glitter just makes them, puts them a level above the V alt art Pokemon from Sword and Shield. Now, these VMAX alt arts are still the top dogs in sort of modern collecting history from set cards, but these SARs, in my mind, are definitely above the V alt art cards. So, you've seen my current stash. I am putting my money where my mouth is. This is a combination of cards that I've sort of bought as singles, and you know what? They're not all gradable. I just like looking at them. So, I'm gonna keep buying these. What are you gonna do? What do you think about the investability of these cards? Let me know in the comments. And if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you want me to do more of this kind of content or more sort of unboxing of modern booster boxes. I'll probably end up doing a mix of both. But yeah, thanks very much for your time. Thank you for watching, and see you guys next time.